My name is Ava Collins. I'm 29 years old. 1 year ago, at a family dinner, I accidentally spilled drink on my mother-in-law. She slapped me so hard my ears rang. Then she grabbed my hair, dragged me to the front door, and threw me out of the house like I was nothing. No one said a word. Not a single person moved. And the one person who should have stopped her, my husband, just stood there watching me with a smile on his face. I said nothing. I walked away in silence. But 3 days later, on the biggest night of their lives, I came back. And before the cameras were turned off, I destroyed everything they had built. What I exposed that night didn't just ruin their reputation, it sent them to prison. And when I learned the truth about that slap, I realized it had never been an accident at all. Before I tell you what actually happened, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me your country in the comments. Now, let's begin. When I married into that family, I believed I had entered a home built on respect, purpose, and generosity. That was the image everyone knew. The Blackwood family wasn't just wealthy, they were admired. They ran charity foundations, hosted large public events, donated to hospitals, and appeared everywhere as a symbol of kindness and influence. People trusted them. Newspapers praised them. Their photographs were always in magazines, smiling beside children, standing next to donations, speaking about compassion, like it was something sacred. And honestly, so did I. In the beginning, everything felt beautiful in a way that made you stop questioning things. The house itself looked like the kind of place where nothing cruel could happen. Tall windows, clean white walls, soft lighting, perfect flowers arranged in crystal vases. Every room had been designed to impress without seeming like it was trying. Even silence in that house felt expensive. My mother-in-law, Margaret Blackwood, was the center of it all. Calm, elegant, always in control. She didn't speak loudly because she didn't need to. People listened anyway. She had that kind of presence, the kind that made other people shrink a little without even realizing it. In public, she was grace, patience, warmth, the kind of woman who would place a gentle hand on someone's shoulder and make them feel seen. At least that's what everyone believed. And my husband, Ryan Blackwood, stood beside her like he had been trained for that world from birth, charming, polished, endlessly confident. He knew how to smile at the exact right moment. He knew how to make people feel like they mattered. He knew how to look sincere, even when he said very little. In those early months, I thought I had been lucky, more than lucky, chosen. Because in private at first, Ryan seemed different. He used to come into our room late at night after meetings and sit beside me while I brushed my hair. Sometimes he would loosen his tie, smile at me in the mirror, and say things that made me feel like we were building something real together. "We're lucky," he told me once, leaning back against the bed. "Most people spend their whole lives chasing comfort. We already have it. So if we can help people at the same time, what could be better than that?" I remember turning to look at him that night and thinking, this is the man I married. This is who he really is. He reached for my hand. "You belong here, Ava," he said, "not just as my wife, as part of this family, as part of this work." I believed him. That was a dangerous part, because when someone lies to you kindly, gently, consistently, you don't notice the lie, you notice the comfort. So I settled into that life. At first, my role in their charity work was small. Guest lists, seating arrangements, donor follow-ups, event schedules. But because I was organized and careful, I was gradually trusted with more. Internal reports, donor databases, event budgets, financial summaries, confidential files. For a while, I felt proud every time Margaret handed me a new folder, or every time Ryan smiled and said, "I knew you could handle it." I thought I had found not just a marriage, but a purpose. Then the small cracks began. Not big enough to destroy the picture, just enough to make me stare at it a little longer. A smile that vanished too quickly. A warm voice that turned cold the second no one important was around. A donor thanked like family while a volunteer was spoken to like furniture. At first, I pushed it aside. Every family has moods, I told myself. Every organization has pressure. Not every moment can be perfect. That's what I wanted to believe. Then one afternoon, after a public event, I saw something I couldn't unsee. We had just finished a charity presentation for struggling families. Cameras were everywhere, lights, reporters, guests with expensive watches and practiced sympathy. Margaret was on stage, beside a mother of 3 who had lost her home. She held the woman's hand so gently it almost looked maternal. "You are not alone," Margaret said into the microphone. "This foundation exists because no mother should ever have to stand in pain without support." The crowd applauded. Some people even cried. The woman cried too. She kept thanking Margaret, thanking the family, thanking everyone as if her entire future had just changed. The cameras followed every second of it. Then the segment ended. The lights shifted. The reporters moved toward the next speaker. And within seconds, Margaret's entire face changed. She removed her hand from the woman's as if she had touched something unpleasant. Her smile disappeared so fast, it almost frightened me. "That's enough," she said in a flat voice. "Please don't return next week expecting more." The woman blinked. I thought someone said there would be temporary housing assistance." Margaret didn't even let her finish. "You received what was approved. Don't make this difficult." The woman just stood there, confused, embarrassed, still clutching the envelope she had been given on stage. I was standing a few feet away. I said nothing, and that silence stayed with me. After that, I began noticing more, not one moment, a pattern. At another event, a sick little boy was brought in with his father for a video segment about emergency care. The child looked exhausted, too tired even to understand why cameras were pointed at him. Ryan knelt beside him in front of everyone and promised with one hand on the child's shoulder that the foundation would make sure he got the treatment he deserves. People clapped again. Donors looked impressed. Later that day, I overheard a quiet conversation in one of the side offices. The estimate for the child's treatment was considered too expensive for the current quarter and not visually sustainable for follow-up. Content. Those were the exact words. Visually sustainable for follow-up content. I remember standing outside that door with a file in my hand, thinking maybe I had misheard it. Maybe the full conversation would explain it. It didn't. They reduced the promised amount before the paperwork was even sent out. Another time, an elderly veteran was invited to one of the foundation's dinner campaigns. He had lost his wife, his health was declining, and he needed help with his medications. In public, Ryan raised a glass and called him a symbol of dignity and sacrifice. Later, after the guests were gone, I heard one of the senior staff members say, "The old man had been selected because he looked sympathetic on camera." The phrase made my stomach turn, because by then it was no longer just moments of coldness. It was strategy. Pain was being selected, presented, packaged. And then I saw the numbers. That was when doubt turned into something harder. Money was coming in from everywhere: donors, partner organizations, corporate sponsors, private investors. The amounts were huge, enough to transform lives if that had been the intention. But when I compared incoming records to outgoing support, too much was missing. The public reports boasted large relief totals, but the actual disbursements were much smaller, sometimes tiny, sometimes strangely delayed, sometimes rerouted through administrative expense categories that made no sense. At first, I thought I was making an error, so I checked again, then again. Then I stayed up half the night comparing one quarter to the next, event claims to banking records, donor statements to internal spreadsheets, public impact summaries to real transfers. And every time I checked, the same ugly truth stared back at me. They weren't just careless. They were taking money, not all of it. That would have looked too obvious. They helped people just enough to keep the story alive, just enough to create photographs, just enough to protect the illusion. The rest disappeared into operational costs, luxury expenses, shell vendors, and polished lies. I tried talking to Ryan, not accusingly, not dramatically. I still loved him then. Or at least I still loved the version of him I thought existed. One night after dinner, I closed the door to our room and said quietly, "Something feels wrong." He looked up from his phone. "About what?" "The foundation, the records. The amounts don't match. And the way people are treated after events. Ryan, it doesn't feel right." He watched me for a second, then smiled. The same easy, reassuring smile that used to calm me. "Ava," he said, "you're seeing the system from too close. Every large organization has complexity." "That isn't complexity," I said. "That's dishonesty." He stood up, walked toward me, and gently touched my arm like I was upset over something small. "We still help people," he said softly. "That's what matters." I remember looking at his face, waiting for something real, a crack, a hesitation, a hint that he cared about what I was saying. There was nothing, only calm, only control. Still, I wasn't ready to accept what that meant. So a few days later, I tried speaking to Margaret, carefully, respectfully. I chose my words like someone walking barefoot over glass. "I think there may be some discrepancies in the financial tracking," I said. "Maybe nothing serious, but I thought you should know I noticed." She didn't even let me finish. She set her teacup down, looked at me with perfect composure, and said, "Your role is to assist, not investigate." I stood there silently. Then she added, "Don't interfere in things you don't understand." That was the moment I stopped speaking. But I didn't stop washing, because by then I had access to too much, and some part of me, maybe the part that still wanted to protect myself, maybe the part that already knew the truth, began saving things, quietly, carefully. At first it was just copies of records, then screenshots, then duplicate ledgers, then archived emails, then bits of raw footage before the final edits. Later, I started keeping short audio clips whenever I heard conversations that didn't match the public image. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even fully admit to myself why I was doing it. I told myself it was for clarity, for proof, to protect my own sanity. Because when you live inside a lie long enough, you start needing evidence that you are not the one losing your mind. But deep down, I think I already knew. Everything became clear the night of the dinner. It was supposed to be simple, just family. No donors, no cameras, no press, no audience to impress. A private meal in the formal dining room, the kind Margaret liked because it reinforced control. Even the silverware was placed as if inspection mattered. The lights were low. The conversations were soft. The food had been arranged perfectly by staff before most people even sat down. I remember standing near the sideboard, looking at the room and thinking how peaceful everything seemed. Margaret was at the head of the table, of course. Ryan sat to her right. His sister was across from him, half listening to one of the uncles talk about a property matter. Someone laughed quietly. Glasses caught the light. It looked like wealth, stability, family, and somehow that made what happened next even uglier. I picked up a tray with drinks and stepped toward the table. I remember the feel of the glass in my hand, smooth, cool, slightly damp. Then, in one quick, stupid, impossible moment, my hand slipped. The juice spilled directly across the front of Margaret's dress. I froze. My heart dropped so fast it made me dizzy. "I'm so sorry," I began. But before I could finish, her hand struck my face, hard. The sound filled the room, sharp, clean, humiliating. For a second, everything stopped. Not one person moved. Not one voice rose in shock. Then her fingers were in my hair, tight. Pain shot through my scalp as she pulled me forward so suddenly I almost lost my balance. My eyes watered instantly. "For something so simple," she snapped, "you still can't even be careful?" I reached up instinctively, not to fight her, just to steady myself. But she dragged me toward the front of the room with a force that felt almost prepared. My mind couldn't catch up. My face burned. My scalp felt like it was tearing. I kept waiting for someone to stop her. No one did. And Ryan just stood there, smiling. That smile changed everything. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't uncertain. It wasn't the uncomfortable smile of someone shocked and frozen. It was calm, controlled, knowing. Margaret dragged me all the way to the front door and shoved it open. "Don't come back until you learn how to behave," she said. Then she pushed me out. The door slammed shut behind me. Just like that. I was standing outside on the porch, in silence, breathing hard, my face burning, my hair disheveled, my hands shaking so slightly I had to look down to notice it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there. Because something inside me was no longer hurt in the way I expected. It was emptier than that. Colder. After a few seconds, I turned my head and looked through the narrow pane of glass beside the door, and I saw him, Ryan, still standing there, still smiling. That was the moment everything ended. Not my marriage on paper. Not my place in that house. Those things had never been real enough to end dramatically. What ended was my doubt. I was never family. I was never safe. And whatever he had said to me in the dark of our room, whatever promises he had made in his soft voice, whatever warmth I thought I had seen in him, it had all been performance. That night, I walked away. I didn't knock again. I didn't call. I didn't wait for an apology that was never coming. The next morning, there were no messages. By evening, nothing. The second day, still nothing. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Let's talk." No, that should not have happened. And that silence told me more than any confession could have. Then came the final piece. The night before the biggest charity gala of the year, I was reviewing the files I had saved, organizing what I planned to expose. While searching through archived system folders, I found something I had forgotten existed. Security footage from inside the house. Most of it was boring. Hallways, entryways, staff movement, empty rooms. Then I opened the dining room recording from the night of the dinner. At first, nothing seemed unusual. People entering, staff setting things down. Then Ryan appeared in the room alone a few minutes before everyone was seated. I paused. He walked to the serving tray, looked over his shoulder, picked up one of the glasses, adjusted it, then did something to the base with his fingers. A chill ran through me. I replayed it. Again. And then Margaret appeared briefly in the doorway. She looked toward him and nodded. My entire body went cold. The spill had not been an accident. The slap had not been sudden anger. It had been planned. I sat there staring at the screen so long that the room around me seemed to disappear. Every memory from that night rearranged itself into something even uglier. The speed of Margaret's reaction, Ryan's smile, the silence in the room, the ease with which I had been thrown out. They wanted me gone. And in that moment, I finally understood why. I had seen too much. I knew too much. And somewhere, maybe in records I had accessed or questions I had asked, they had realized I was no longer safe to keep close, so they made me the problem. That was when I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling clear. The next night I went back. The gala was everything people expected from the Blackwood family. Grand, beautiful, carefully lit, gold tones everywhere, giant screens displaying photographs of children, elderly recipients, hospital visits, disaster relief, smiling volunteers. Music floated through the ballroom. Well-dressed guests moved from table to table with glasses in hand, praising generosity they did not understand. Margaret stood near the center of it all, radiant and composed in a dark formal gown, greeting investors with the same warm smile she had used 100 times before. Ryan moved easily through the room, speaking to donors, shaking hands, laughing softly as if nothing had happened, as if he had not watched me be dragged out by my hair 3 nights earlier, as if he had not arranged it, until I walked in. The first few people noticed me quietly, then more turned. Whispers spread in small ripples. I heard my name once. Then again, I didn't stop. I walked straight through the room, past the tables, past the volunteers, past Margaret and Ryan without even looking at them directly, and went to the stage. One coordinator stepped toward me, confused, but I moved past him before he decided whether to intervene. I picked up the microphone. The sound echoed. The room slowly went quiet. "My name is Ava Collins," I said. "And before anyone here gives this family another dollar, you deserve to know the truth." You could feel the room change in that moment, not loudly, not dramatically, but the way a room changes when oxygen shifts. Margaret stepped forward with a smile so polished it almost made me sick. "Ava has been under emotional stress," she began, trying to wrap the moment in concern. I pressed the remote. The screen behind me lit up. The first video played. Margaret on stage, smiling warmly, speaking to a struggling mother, promising help. Then the unedited footage continued after the cameras should have cut. Her smile dropped. Her voice turned cold. "That's enough. Don't come back asking again." The audience stiffened. A second clip followed. Ryan promising a donor that every cent from a medical fundraiser would be directed toward emergency care. Then the matching internal record appeared beside it, showing a far smaller amount actually released. Whispers started. A third clip, a fourth, more numbers, more footage, kindness on camera, cruelty off camera, again and again and again. I did not rush. I let them see it, let it sink in, let their admiration curdle into discomfort, then suspicion, then anger. Then the financial records appeared in larger detail, donation totals, public claims, actual disbursements, administrative diversions, luxury expense labels buried under program headings. Someone near the front stood up. "What is this?" "It's the truth," I said. Margaret tried to move closer to me, but by then no one was listening to her. Investors were already pulling out phones. Assistants were speaking urgently to each other. A man at one of the side tables said, loudly enough for others to hear, "Freeze the transfer." Then I showed the final video, the dinner, the tray, Ryan walking into frame before everyone else, his hand touching the glass, Margaret appearing in the doorway, the nod. The room fell into a deeper silence than before, because greed disturbs people, fraud angers them, but cruelty planned for convenience disgusts them. I looked directly at Ryan. "The night your family humiliated me," I said into the microphone, "was not an accident." No one moved. I pressed play again and let the clip run a second time. Then I said, "You smiled while she dragged me out, and now I know why. Because you planned it." Ryan's face lost all color. He opened his mouth as if he might deny it, but nothing came out. Margaret finally snapped, "This is manipulation." "No," I said. "This is evidence." The room exploded after that. Not physically, not wildly, but in the way powerful people unravel when trust is taken from them in public. Questions rose from every side. Is this real? How long has this been happening? We funded them. I want the accounts reviewed tonight. One elderly donor stood up, visibly shaking, and said to Margaret, "I defended you." Ryan looked at me once, just once, and there was something close to fear in his eyes for the first time. Good, I thought. Let him feel one honest emotion. By morning, the clips had spread. By afternoon, so had the documents. The press picked it up almost immediately, but the real damage came from the people who had money inside the foundation. They demanded audits, records, access, explanations. Internal reviews became external investigations. Accounts were frozen. Partner organizations withdrew. Properties tied to misused funds were flagged. Emails were examined. Transfers were tracked. Margaret released statements, of course, calm, legal, practice. She claimed I was unstable, vindictive, misinterpreting internal operations. Ryan stayed silent at first, then tried the weaker version of the same defense. But lies collapse quickly when they are forced to stand next to proof. The cases grew. Fraud, financial misconduct, misuse of charitable funds, false representation, conspiracy. And because of the dinner footage, because of what had been done to remove me before I could speak, the story became bigger than money. It became betrayal, abuse, a planned humiliation, a family so certain of their power that they believed they could stage cruelty and still remain untouchable. They were wrong. They lost everything, their money, their reputation, their social standing, their power, and finally, their freedom, both of them. I did not go to court to watch it happen. I didn't need to. But months later, I saw Ryan once by accident from across a courthouse corridor while officers were moving him through a side entrance. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not just thinner, smaller. As if the image he had once lived inside had been stripped off and nothing strong remained beneath it. His eyes found mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his lips parted and he said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." And maybe he was. Maybe for the first time in his life, he meant something. It didn't matter. Because some apologies arrive only after consequences, and those apologies are never about healing the person who was hurt. They are about easing the weight of being the person who caused the hurt. So I said nothing. I turned and walked away. The woman who stood outside that front door with a burning cheek and trembling hands no longer existed. She ended the night I realized I had been loved only as long as I remained useful. The woman who walked away from that courthouse was different, clearer, quieter, free. And I didn't destroy them. I just stopped protecting their lies. And once the truth stood in full light, everything they were collapsed on its own.